Welcome in, my friends, to another episode of the Subscription Web Design Podcast. For the first time ever, I have a guest on the podcast, my good friend Christian. Christian, how you doing, man?
Hey man, good to have me on the show today. Looking forward to see what we're going to talk about today and what we can
Yeah,
bring your listeners today. So
it should be good, man. I'm excited. Do me a favor because I don't think I have ever tried to do this before. How do you pronounce your name, your full name?
so in Dutch it would be Christian van 't Hof. So
Wow, I'm
that's
glad I
what would
didn't
be in
try.
Dutch. Yeah,
I'm glad I
yeah,
didn't try. That's awesome. Very cool. Well, I wanted to bring Christian on because he and I have been working together for quite a few years now. And, one of the things that I really want to start talking about more is this idea of scaling. Because, for me, and this may or may not be true. But one of the ways that I define having a job versus having a business is that if the only time you're ever making money is when you're sitting in front of a computer screen, you arguably have a job. Now, it might be a nice job, it might be a high paying job, and it might be a job that gives you still some freedom and flexibility. But at the end of the day, it's still just a job. And so, in order to build a business, there are quite a few things that you have to do. And one of those things is you have to bring in people who are able to do things that you are not able to do, or maybe you are able to do them, but they can do them better. And so I just wanted to, I'm gonna let Christian sort of introduce himself a little bit here, but I wanted to kind of pre-frame the discussion that's how me and Christian started working together was by actually being able to say, okay, well, Christian can do this part of the work that I can't do. And it might take me 3 hours to do something that takes him 3 minutes. And even if I have to pay Christian for that 3 minutes, almost certainly that's a better use of my time and money and resources than for me to sit there for 3 hours and try to figure it out. So that's kind of the lay the foundation of what we want to talk about today, how to get started with some of that. We're going to talk a little bit from the technical perspective, but I think even more from the business perspective. So, Christian, if you would just sort of introduce yourself a little bit to the audience, like what do you do? And yeah, we'll go from there.
yeah. So my name is Christian. Now still 29, so still a young boy.
Man,
That's still having a lot of time ahead of him. But I live in Brazil. I've been living here for the last 7 years, and that's why because we got married to my wife here as well 5 years ago. So my origin isn't Brazilian, of course, as you can see with my appearance and my last name. So I'm born in the Netherlands, which is where I grew up, went to university. I got a major in international business and languages. So I speak a few languages, about like 4 or 5 different languages that I speak.
man.
And I grew up in a family company, family business, and that's kind of how I rolled into the perspective of wanting to like run my own business in the future. And to be honest, until now, I've only had a year and a half as a full-time employee at another company. The rest was either a few hours a week at a company, like a local supermarket or something like that, or working freelance with my own clients. And now, since the last 3 years, I've gone 3.5 years. I've gone full time in web development, and I've been helping agencies scale up by being their preferred white label partner on projects. In that way, that they could focus on their business, focusing on sales, learning the ropes, and scaling up in the meantime and building recurring revenue.
Yeah. I had no idea you spoke 4 or 5 languages. That is like really cool. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So Christian is very popular in some circles. Some of you guys may even know him. He's very popular in Josh Hall's community, and of course, you guys know that Josh is a coach of mine, and we've been friends for quite some time. And a lot of people sort of know Christian as like the at least I know him as like the resident code monkey, right? I met Christian because Christian is a whiz with everything related to I mean CSS and PHP and like I guess JavaScript. I mean, he just knows a lot of languages and knows his way around them. And so for me, whenever I had problems arise, you know, it would be like, well, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's so much easier for me to reach out to him and have him to work on that. And so, what Christian has, you know, in various different capacities for companies. Like I know there are some times where you'll do the design work, you'll do more of the actual just on-page building work, and then sometimes you'll do some of the actual development and coding work as well. But I think there's a lot of people that wouldn't know, even if they do know you, they maybe don't know how experienced you are in business. Tell me a little bit about, like you said, you grew up like, you know, in a family business. Did you work in your dad's business, or how did that go?
So I basically was born in my dad's company, as in a way that when I was born, my parents they ran the company together. So my dad had founded it. So to give it a little bit of like background story, it's a so they sell beds. So they use water beds, box springs, mattresses, and all that around it. And they sell like wardrobes as well, and all like the extra things that you can sell next to it. And that has been growing over the last, like, it's been around almost 30 years, I think, that my dad has that company. A little bit more, I think, because since I was young, my mom did most like administration of the company. My dad ran it. And over the last year, like over those years, he's really focused on like the consulting part, not just selling, really helping people like with their issues. And even though they would maybe like purchase something more expensive, he would still get them the right thing at the time with the knowledge of that time, what would fit for their specific needs. And since my mom was working there when I was born, because I'm the oldest of the family. We got 4 kids at home, which are not all kids anymore. Most are grown up now, but I spent like my days as a toddler, like just crawling in the store, which then was a tiny store, which now is a 3 storage store with like the main level, upper level, and the basement where all the stock would be.
Wow.
So that, and from a young age, I was at the company, like I was there. So I started just like 3-4 years old. I started just like taking like the biscuits and the cookies into refill certain places at the store where they would have little seats with tables where they could talk with clients and advise them. And I would just refill like the sugar and the milk and like the cookies that were in there. And that's kind of how I started out in that company. And bit by bit, I started to go with my dad to clients. So if there would be a client with issues, he would go there, and like from at 4, 5, 6 years old, I would just jump into my dad's car with him, visit the client, pretend to be the expert on everything around beds, and go that way. So that's kind of like how I gradually started to be part of the family business. I've never been under contract like fixed. I think just half a year that I've been working fixed at my dad's company. But I just helped out when needed. If there was if there was an employee that like did mostly deliveries and installations, I would go with the other person to still have, because a lot of the jobs are like 2-man jobs. If you need to go upstairs, like if you have like a double bed mattress, like you just can't with one person lift that up the stairs. Like there's a lot of like bigger cities in the Netherlands with like smaller apartments, and you still need to get it up the stairs. And that was kind of how I rolled into like the family business in that way. And when like I got older, like at home, we just started to discuss things about the company, even though like it wasn't my thing. I was like a sounding board in some things inside the company for my dad, just because our personalities aligned quite a lot. And that's how I grew up in that.
Yeah. There's a couple things I want to kind of pull out from that. So, it's a really simple example of you like, restocking items in the store while your dad is having those consulting conversations. Like that is normal. That is basic business, right? Like it's basic business that if your dad is restocking the shelves, so to speak, then he can't at the same time be advising a client or a customer. And the reality is that his highest and best impact is advising a customer or making a sale or thinking through a strategic decision, right? This is basic business. People get hired every day for jobs because the next person up the ladder from them has a more significant role to play in the lifetime of the business. And I just think it's so interesting. And you can give me your thoughts on this. Tell me if you see this a lot or if I'm just coming out of left field. For some reason in this world, in sort of the digital web design, graphic design world, we don't typically think this way. Like we go into business for ourselves and we think that we have to wear all the hats. I mean, one of the most popular like business management softwares is called 17 Hats because we're used to having to wear all the hats. And I think this is just a false assumption. Now, is there anything wrong with that? No, but certainly don't have to do it that way. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think when you look at a business, not everyone looks at a business the same way. Like obviously, it's like if you would like, let's say you would like, if you put it into the Christian world, like if you would ask 10 pastors to give a sermon about one scripture, none of the 10 would have the exact sermon like prepared. Just because when you look at things, we see it from a different angle. In the same way is depending on how you get into business. Let's say there's people that have always like they've gone to design school. They have gone into like they did like an IT or like a web design education, like formally, and that's how they got into web development. Which, if we look at like our industry, that's maybe might be 5 to 10%, might even be a lot that go in that way. So if you look at it from that perspective, a lot of people don't come from a business perspective or like a totally educational perspective into our business. And if you would take it like wider in any business, you usually start a business either because of financial needs that you think that work, like after having worked for different people, you think you can do a similar thing for yourself and you start your own company in that way because you're tired of making someone else money and you want to make the decisions yourself and you get into that position of running a business. On the other hand, there's people that started to do things on the side as a hobby because they had someone ask for it. You started to investigate how does that work, how you build a website. So let's say I read something about WordPress. I'm just going to see if we can set up a WordPress installation, pick a theme, get a website done. And that expanded and exploded. And there's like any different ways people can get into business, but rarely because they wanted to be a technical person, they wanted to be a business person, they wanted like take care of like employees, they wanted to take care of all the different hats you can wear in a company. And no one gets into business because of that. It's a lot of things that they didn't expect a business would entail in doing like admin work. Like how many people go into business and they're like 5 years in and they don't really have it could be just a spreadsheet of like their like income projection with their costs, with their revenue, and what they're in the end making. And that's what's just happening is when you get into business, you don't expect what's all involved in it.
Yeah, so I totally agree. Like, and the same thing transparently happened to me. Now, of course, I had a business mentor when I was, you know, teenage years, etc. And so I saw how much more money he made than I did. So I definitely went into it knowing that something needed to, you know, that eventually needed to happen. I got advice from actually there was a few people that were saying this when I first started to get into the online you know, business world, looking at different influencers and what they had to say. And I did hear the advice of scale early, of like hire your first person before you think you need to. And I actually, I do think that's good advice. I took the advice and it worked for me. But that's not to say that I wouldn't have done it a little differently in hindsight, right? I think in hindsight, I would have, I would like to think I would have still done it. I would have still hired before I was ready, but I think I would have been a little more ready than I was, if that makes sense, right? I would have at least done some of them, you know, a little bit more of the number crunching, etc., versus just diving right into it. But I did know pretty early on that I wanted to spend more time, you know, working it on the business rather than working in the business. That's kind of the way that we typically hear that talked about. You're right, doing the entrepreneurial work, the business work versus doing the technical work. Now, there are some people who prefer the technical work, right, to doing the business work, and yet they still want the freedoms of that come with owning your own business. So I wonder your thoughts on what does a person in that situation have to do?
Like, I wanted to get quickly back to something you mentioned is that
Yeah.
you knew that you wanted to get into like a more business owner perspective, right? And
Yeah.
that's why you have the different personalities. And I think when starting a business is really important, even like before deciding to hire someone, is what is your objective with your business? Where do you want to get to? So in my case, in like since I went full time the last 3.5 years, I've had one kind of an intern, one employee. It was my nephew who I wanted to help out because it was in a spot that he wasn't really spending much time at home. I would like to just invest in him, try to teach him some things, and just being a good uncle in a way, but still like teach him a few things. And in my case, like there's like you can get into business with the desire to scale because nowadays a lot of people like no one like tells you to start a business without focusing on huge revenue. Everyone focuses on revenue, and one thing we both have learned is that revenue doesn't equal profit. Those two things are entirely different. Don't need to be you don't need to have a high revenue to be profitable, because profitability is a percentage. And of course you need to have a certain income when starting for yourself to cover all your costs, and it depends on your spending patterns and the budgetary needs that you have. But to start a business, you need to focus on what's your objective. Is your objective to to have a high profitability and a high turnover like in 2 years? Then yes, you need to scale quick, right? You need to still scale quickly. And in my case, I'm just 29. I've got a lot of years ahead in which I can do like anything what I like to do, depending on what you decide to do, right? So once you if your needs are to immediately solve issues, and you know that, like in your case, Steve, your capabilities are more business minded rather than like solving CSS issues and troubleshooting why things don't work, then you know that for your business to become successful in web is that you need to be able to decide how that you want to spend your time on working on the business rather than inside the business. And I think that's one of the main key principles that like everyone teaches you, like to become a business owner of like an agency owner of like 10, 15 employees. You need need to have like a legion of freelancers that you can count on, that you work with, but it depends on your objectives. Like in my case, like practically last 3.5 years, like the last 10 years, because I founded my business in the Netherlands 10 years ago, that I started to do my first projects. And I haven't really outsourced much to others in a lot of things, just because it wasn't one of the things that I needed to do. Because once you start scaling up, of course, a lot of the things that you need to do, they scale up. So if you want to scale up, your admin scales up. If you want to build a business properly, which I think, which from my experience and as well my education tells me that when once like you can like build websites, but if you don't look at what you're actually doing in numbers, if you don't organize things, like you waste time. Because once you have things organized and you have admin in place, like sending out a contract, sending out a proposal, those things shouldn't be things that cost you time. Or if they cost you time, they need to be high budget with that. So I think there's a lot of things that you need to consider with that.
Yeah, I agree. So a lot of what I'm hearing is it's about knowing your strengths, it's about knowing your weaknesses, and it's about knowing your goals, right? Where you want to go. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah. And like there's no definitive like answer on what is good and right. And there's also like things like journeys. Like a lot of people, they say, okay, where I want to go now is where you should go. Like, no. So one practical example. So when 10 years ago, I did with Youth with a Mission, which is a Christian organization focused on missions. I joined there for half a year. I did a discipleship training school. And part of that was 3 months lecture in the Netherlands, and 3 months it was going to Brazil, working as a missionary in different like NGOs or churches. And that's kind of how I got in touch with Brazil for the first time. And in my case, I really loved it here. I felt home in a weird way, because it just felt like, okay, all the puzzle pieces in a way like felt together. And from that moment, I knew is that I wanted to go back to Brazil. So what I did was, when I came home, it wasn't that I booked the flight, like a one-way ticket, and got back. What I did is that I initially wanted to study accounting before.
Oh man.
Yeah. So when I got out of high school, I went for half a year. I joined Youth with a Mission, YWAM, to do this discipleship training school. But before that, I had did some tests and things. And that was also because I officially have autism, Asperger's syndrome, which in the past really troubled me in a lot of things. But it's things that I've been able to deal with and still get a business together, focus on relationships, and overcome a few of my difficulties. But what I did is I really felt and knew that for me to go back to Brazil, I needed to know who I am, where I want to go to, and what would be possible different roads to get there. So what I ended up doing is I ended up choosing international business and languages as my major for uni, which is different than accounting.
Right.
And that's how I learned some languages, even though before going to uni and before joining YWAM, is that I was still stuttering. And I had like my grades for English were just terrible. They were just horrible. Just because I was stuttering as well, that really prevented me from being able to learn languages.
Right.
Like Dutch, I had like difficulties with Dutch, like not speaking Dutch in general, but more like the educational grades for Dutch weren't that great. The same for
Right.
English and other languages. And I ended up doing well, partially languages. And that's one of the weird things is that when we have something that we want to go for, we're able to do that. And I believe from my side is that something that God showed me in terms of like
Yeah.
as a perspective in a way to go. So I ended up doing that major, and I did a specialization in a minor during my 4 years of uni in Latin American business studies. So,
Very good.
which then I combined with an internship in Peru for 6 months. So that helped me improve my Spanish, and Spanish is then one of the other languages that I speak besides Dutch, English, and Portuguese. And I speak German as well. Both Spanish and German have been a little bit rusty because of the time that I haven't really used it as much. But those
Right.
are two languages that were part of my major. And what I've done is that I've tried to prepare my road to where I want to get. So that doesn't mean that you should, like, if you want to scale up, that you can't just scale up right away. But something's important to figure out where you want to go to
Yeah.
and to figure out what are different ways. And if you know that you, Steve, don't want to learn CSS and you just to prefer totally focus on getting business in, nurturing clients, selling clients up, and going with them, then what you should do is focus on that and get other people to do what you don't want to do, don't want to
Mhm.
learn, and don't want to invest your time in, because those are lower tickets things that aren't making you more money. They're just saving you money from not like hiring someone.
Yeah, I wonder about. So that makes a ton of sense, and it's exactly the route that I take, and I definitely want to talk about. I definitely want to talk about the like how to get started with this, and a little bit about the white label stuff. But
Hmm.
before we move on to that, um, I am sensitive to the person out there who, like, I have a few friends that I could, in my mind, I can picture who are like this. They want to have a business, but their favorite part is the coding, right? Their favorite part is the design. Now you're somebody who you do it all, right? Um,
Hmm.
but you are also a business major and you actually really like business. So I wonder what your advice would be to someone who says, well, I want to be a business owner, but I don't want to do all the admin work. All the is it what I mean, what do you think about that? Is there a case for bringing on somebody to help with the admin work while you focus on the technician work that you want to do even as the business owner? Or do you have any thoughts or
Hmm.
advice on that?
So I think there's different ways of doing things. And the same way you can have, let's say, one person work for you, like I can still consider you a sole proprietor, right? You don't
Sure.
need, because there's things that are like required to do to run a business, and there are things that like are like extra things that you can do to improve your business. Because like depending on where you are, where you live, you might have more like legal requirements for like all the things related to taxes and book. So even though you're one person, you obviously often can still outsource things to a bookkeeper, which is in a way someone that you outsource to, because one rarely business owners want to specialize in bookkeeping. Only if you have a back office company, of course, but you don't. So there's things that are part of your business that are just part there, just like costs. You can't run a business without having costs. You have them in any way to do things. So there's a difference between hiring, for example, like people like that are developers, designers, copywriters, SEO specialists, photographers, videographers, or like business strategists. And there's a difference between essential business operation personnel. And I think you can, it's easy to scale. Like for scaling up, you need other people, or because otherwise your time is limited. You can scale up your income, but you can't scale up your time. Right. And usually you want to scale down your time. So the only way to scale down your time is either have less things to do. So that's why a lot of people get into like community building, courses, mentoring, where they can attend larger groups of people with the same time investment. But if that's not you, and that's what a lot of people that you say is like, I want to code, it's like, I just want to do that, and I still want to build my business, is what they should do is like specialize themselves in what they do, get known for a thing and double down on it, and make sure that the rest that you don't like but are still essentials, that they are taken care in some way. Because the worst thing is building a business, trying to focus on like work with and still worrying about like if you're gonna pay the bills at the end of the month or beginning of the month, right? Because that's gonna derail you, and that you focus on the wrong things. Because then you focus on like the quick projects that are like for short term to really get some cash flow in. And of course, every business has that. Every business has sometimes needs to change their main, like the main direction of where they're going, and make some side choices to do that. But you can still do things. So in my case, I like doing some part of the admin work. So I like going into my spreadsheet, and I'm probably one of the techie persons that still likes a spreadsheet that isn't a software developer in a way, because I know that software developers usually they like to build their own things. I like modern software, and because it really makes things easier. But there's some things that I like to do because I like to have control of what I see, what data manipulate, and over the years, my spreadsheet has become like pretty large in what I have in there, just because that's my personality type. And I've got a business major, and that's what I like about like the financial side of things. I like all that. And that's beside doing branding, design, development.
See, I want the result of the spreadsheet without having to put the spreadsheet together, right? Because it's another thing that I'm really bad at, right? And so for me to even learn how to do it, like I've got a buddy who is a whiz with spreadsheets because he's a finance guy, right? He does accounting, and so like I'm starting to talk with him about maybe putting something together for me, so that I can keep updated and so. But that's even an example of it, right? Christian is in the weeds, in the details. He likes to see the numbers, but he also likes to put the spreadsheet together and work with it. I want to see the numbers. I don't want to put the spreadsheet together. So I'm going to hire somebody who is good at that thing, who will produce a better version of it than I would. And then I just have it. He'll show me how to use it, and it's done, right? Now, so that is a prime example of leveraging money, which is, I mean, this is a whole different conversation, but money is this, like you mentioned, money is actually a scalable resource. Time is not. Money is infinite. There's not some like pie of money where if it goes away from you, it goes to you, it goes away from somebody else. That's really not how money works. Money can be infinitely scaled. Time cannot be infinitely scaled. We are all working on a clock that will one day run out, and only the good Lord knows when that day will come. And so we have to do our best to maximize that resource. And so, yeah, sometimes that is going to mean hiring somebody, spending money, trading that money so that you actually get your time back. And even just the spreadsheet is a really great example. So if you're somebody and you like to design websites and you like to code websites and you want to build websites, but you don't want to do like complex financial modeling and all of that, hire somebody to help you with that stuff so you can focus on what you do best. Now, there are some roles, I would argue, as a business owner, you're just going to have to roll up your sleeves and know, right? You are going to have to get good at sales. You're going to have to know, profitability versus revenue and some very basic numbers, at least, even if you have somebody else handle the details. And I would recommend you just read some books and get up to date on that stuff. But so there are those key crucial roles, but virtually anything and everything in a business is outsourceable to the right person. There's even, and maybe you could, go ahead, Christian. Yeah.
So one of those examples is that usually when you think about like scaling up, there's usually like this, when you're running a business, usually two models, right? If you like have a small business, of course, venture capital, VCs, like that's different. If you have investors and things, yeah. But usually our view is that we have the freelancer that might work alone or just like work with one or two other freelancers to fill the gaps, or like to, as a collective, provide a service. So if you don't have all the services, then you just work every now and then with one or two persons together. This is still, I think, the freelancer. There's the business owner that you have. So in your case, that has people working for him that you outsource to, and the different kind of types of activities that you outsource. But there's also where you can scale into in time. And for one of the things that my dad has done in his business, and that's not web, but still same thing applies, is that one of the things that gets him up in the morning is that he likes to not necessarily work, like do the business side of things. Even though he is a business owner, an entrepreneur, as I see him, he's won like a local official entrepreneur of the city award, which is pretty professional in a way, where you where you even go into revenue, into all the financial things. It's not just the voting, and you just give your community time to vote, which I see a lot of awards that are like that. But what he found out in time is that what he still likes to do is the practical things. He still likes to sit down with people that walk into the store, walk them through like their needs. Like when we start a website project, the first thing is that we need to do is diagnose. Like, what type of issue do you have? Rarely a company has a website issue. The website is just a method to grow revenue or solve business issues.
Yep.
And what he likes is getting to those personal issues in that case, or like if a business issues, if you like don't sleep well, you wake up like every time with a sore body, and you wake up like with like being tired, then there's multiple things going on. But what he liked is doing that thing, sit down, see what people need, get into the right solution that falls into the budget. If it would be at one of the things that he can provide, or if it would be like a competitor or something in his industry that would do it better for them. And in time, what he has done, he has hired a business manager. So my dad, he still was the owner, but he saw himself as a consultant, and he had like in the hierarchy, he had a business manager in place
Yep. That's
that
huge.
just took care of managing staff, doing all those things. Like, and my dad just did really like the major top level things, like the C-level kind of decisions. So a little bit more the marketing budget things, but a lot of the budgetary things were as well with his business manager.
Yep.
And so that's another model, that rather than the conventional ones, with either being the mechanic. So if have you read the E-Myth Revisited?
Oh
The E-Myth,
yes.
yeah. So for
One of
people
my
that
favorites.
haven't read that, is it's the switch from being the mechanic, like the person that does the work, to become the business owner. And the mindset changes in how your hats change, and how a lot of people struggle with that, and how like you can deal with that. And like that, those are the conventional things. Either you're the mechanic or you are the business owner. Yeah.
That book is. I often say it like this: it's probably got the worst cover and the worst title of any business book in history, but it is probably one of the best business books in history. It's well written and very clear, and honestly life changing. So definitely read the E Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. Yeah, you got these three levels, really, right? The technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. And when a technician gets into business for himself, he often forgets that there are those other roles that need to be played. And for me, like um a bit like hiring a business manager is definitely in the future. For me, it's going to be one of those steps that I don't know if it'll be the next step, but it's in the next few years. Because like I kind of view it a couple different ways. Like we have a project manager, Brian, and I'm telling you what, my project manager, kind of getting more into the brass tacks of web design stuff. You don't understand like the load that takes off of you to have somebody who is thinking at the project level
No.
with you, right? Because your technicians, everybody's great. Everybody's got a role to play on the team, but a technician is purposefully, because this is their job, thinking in terms of the project they are working on. Whatever their hands are touching in the moment is what a technician is thinking about. Okay. A project manager is somebody who is thinking at the same, not at the same overall level that you are, but they're like if you're watching this on video, you can see my hands. Like they're like at the bottom level of wherever you're thinking. They're right there at the bottom level where the higher concerns of the business are interfacing with the actual work that's going on, but they're seeing, right? They're actually seeing an overview of the different projects that are going on. And so it's like I have my project manager, Brian, every week, every Monday morning, he writes what we call a heartbeat. And that is, it
No.
doesn't take him too long, but that's basically a snapshot of where we're at with all of the current projects that we're working on and what is being focused on next and who needs to focus on what. And just having somebody think at that level is an amazing shift. And then that goes to the next level when you have what Christian's talking about, when you have a business manager or a COO or somebody who is applying that same level of thought to the concerns of the business yourself, like you are. Now they won't have the exact amount of investment and buy-in that you do, because at the end of the day, they're ultimately an employee and you're ultimately the business owner. And it's impossible for
No.
somebody else to love your baby as much as you love it. But especially if they're paid well, there are some people who are just excellent at that and really skilled at it and love to do that kind of work. So that definitely should be in the thought process for people
Yeah.
who are more interested in doing some of the technician work long term, or even if you're not, right? It's good to have
Yeah.
somebody else thinking at that level, right?
And I think as well, like if you say, Steve, are you in 5 years, are you still gonna be running North Mech yourself? Like, is that still gonna be your business? Like, If
Right.
you want to say, okay, because your business models is one of the most valuable in long term. Like
Mhm.
initially, I know the struggles you've had to grow that because that's what subscription has and working with
Yeah.
freelancers. Because you need to get to a certain point to be able to front load money of freelancers to be able to do things. And you need to have a specific level of recurring revenue of your subscriptions to be able to hire fixed employees, even though it doesn't need to be full time, but you need to be able to buy like 20 hours a week at least from someone, or scaling that up and get
Yep.
like kind of exclusivity from someone. But if you were to be able to place then someone in your position and you are able to really focus on the top level on business, improve processes and work on those things, then you get to the next stage of your business and you're in the process of thinking about scaling up, I think.
Hmm.
Because that's gonna make
Yep.
like create write a path for you of how things might go and what the issues will be that you might run into. Build to sell goes into how you build your business so it will run without you,
Yeah.
which either allows you to sell the business or just remove you from the picture and just do whatever you want to do during the day and have a business that runs. And that will allow you still, like, it doesn't necessarily prepare to sell, it allows you to be able to sell it, but it allows you to run your business your by yourself by not wasting much time and being efficient, because it
Yeah.
focuses on processes. Like, create your process and adjust the process as you go, because no process stays the same, because every project might be like different in some details, but the major part of the process is the same. And that allows you
Yep.
to either work yourself as a side hustle, because your time is limited if you have a full-time day job and you work in the evenings, or depending on like what time, like schedule you have in work. Because if you are like in a more medical or something area, you might work in evenings or like mixed things, but you want to make some extra money
Hmm.
on the side. You need to be able to run that like efficiently. You need to be able to do that in a way that it doesn't cost you time. In, let's say I've signed a client and now what are the next steps? Like, I've got someone interested. How do you send a proposal? How do you send a contract? And how do you then
Hmm.
efficiently start a project? How do you set up a development site? What is the tech stack that you're going to use? If all those things change every time, if all the variables involved change, no matter if you're going to scale up, if you're going to sell the business, or just we're going to work yourself, that's going to be issues. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to waste time. And you have, you know, that is that of course there's things that you haven't been involved with much yourself from like in a long term view, like for building out full websites. You have done that in the past. That's how you started, because you needed to get your first project in.
Sure.
But it's not one of the things that you've done with the experience of having it done multiple times and having nailed down a process. Um, that's why sometimes people start do a course, so they already get like a head start with that and
Yeah.
implement the process that someone does. And that's a good start if you don't want to make your hands dirty and you don't have the time to spend on figuring things out. Even though figuring things out might bring you further in the long run, because you know your system and what works for your business and your solutions. But in the end, focusing on processes will allow you to build your your company, even scaling up yourself, because you're gonna free time,
Yeah.
be able to take on more jobs, because you're better in providing consistent client experience, which is key, consistent deliverables, partially because there might be things that the client provides, and that not always are the highest quality that you strive to provide, um,
Yeah.
like that. And you have you have a repeatable thing. Making things repeatable allows you to, let's say you got Sam. in your team. You say, Sam, these are your checklists or these are your processes. Spend a week of your time this month, like your first week, go through that process of 2 dummy projects. Like it can be real projects, it can be dummy projects. Here are a few briefs. Like, nowadays, like go to ChatGPT, ask it to create 2 website briefs, provide a description, provide a website outline, build that out, provide the content and build it out. Like use the systems that you have in place. And you don't need, as a business owner, you don't need to handhold him. There might be places where he asks his questions, and that's not because you did a bad job in creating your processes, but you created the processes being you.
Right. Yep.
You already know in which folder things need to go, into which Google Drive account you need to create the folder.
Yep.
If the process starts like create a folder in the project folder, which account is linked to that? And there's things that you're gonna run into, but that's the key to scaling your business and onboarding people the best way without you wasting time.
Oh man, there's just so much there. Like one of the big things to hit on there is like when you're working with people, and again, you're trying to basically teach them your process, which you got to develop a process. Like again, that itself is also worth underscoring. Like before I started hiring, I had already started making checklists, making Loom videos of how I wanted things done, storing those things. But those changed over time as I went through the process that Christian just described. As I've worked with my guys like Sam and Christian and others over the years, what we've learned is that, well, sometimes it's better to do it this way, or sometimes it's better to do it that way, or the way I was thinking about it is different than how he was thinking about it. And so the process needs to either he needs to get aligned with the process, or the process needs to change because actually his way was better. A lot of those discoveries get made in the process of like if you only ever answer questions when your team comes to you, then guess what? They will always come to you to get answers to those questions. So one of the things that has really made the difference for us is I try to answer questions when possible by saying, well, how would you handle this? Or, you make the decision and I'll support it. Right. And as you work with people for a longer amount of time, eventually they begin to make decisions on their own. And you have to be willing to stand by them. And there's a lot to talk about there. But that is something that can really, really be helpful. So, okay. We're getting close on time here. So I want to certainly be respectful of your time and get to a couple brass tacks on some things. So, one of the ways that you talked about earlier, like there's different ways that you can work with people. Obviously there's like a freelancer thing. Another thing you can do is joint venture with people. Like we're not going to go into details, but like there are some people that you like sort of like partner with, that you've done in the past on sites, right? Where it's like maybe there's a percentage here, a percentage there, and that might be a recommended path. Let's say that you're a technician and you want to own a business, but you really don't want to do any of the sales and marketing stuff. Maybe there's somebody who only wants to do sales and marketing and you partner with them 50-50 on projects or something and let them do all the sales and marketing and you come in and then you do the technician work. So that's another route that you can take. So let's talk about this real quick. So I often make a distinction between hiring contractors, fulfillment partners, and full-time employees. And so full-time employee, that's pretty obvious. That's what you are before you quit your job and go full-time. That's a full-time employee. You can hire those too in your business. Okay. Then on the other spectrum, you've got contractors, people who work for you, but not necessarily exclusively. Now they might, but probably not. They probably work for lots of other people. You might use the term freelancer here. I think that would work as well. And then you've got in the middle what I call fulfillment partners, which are people who they do work like as your team, like they'll communicate on clients with your behalf, etc. But they're sort of like a completely separate business entity. Do you agree with all of that? And do you have any like thoughts on where people should think about getting started or any other considerations?
So I think you're pretty accurate in those three different topics, like the different categories, how you can define people. And getting started obviously isn't getting someone full time. Um, Obviously depends on your kind of company, right? If you would have a clothing store physically, of course you would need full-time employees or at least
Right.
part-time. There's no way around it. If you have like a store, like a company in a shopping mall, you need to meet the requirements of that shopping mall of like opening hours. So,
Right.
like, supposedly, if everyone listening today, like to this podcast, and everyone in your audience is mainly a web design business, then I wouldn't recommend getting full-time employees because your revenue isn't stable enough yet from the start. Or most likely, what you will end up doing is you will pay your subcontractors more than you do yourself. And that's one of the golden rules, is what for me really worked as well, besides the two books that we already mentioned, was for me reading, and actually that one I think I actually read, is the book from Mike Michalowicz, Profit First.
Yeah.
And Profit First allows you to just, even though you don't know much about finance, you're just used to paying your own bills, and you haven't really put any thought to finance, is the focus is to like reserve a percentage for yourself and then build the rest besides taxes around that to allow you to either have a strategic reserve and have funds for operational costs. As soon as you've done that, because a business is not going to grow as long as if the business owner isn't like happy with what he's doing with his business in terms of like resolving his personal issues, because he usually create, like we discussed in the beginning, you start a business because you want to make more money or change your lifestyle, like, or in my case because I hate taking orders from bosses.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't deal well with that. But from there, so what you do is you start to keep your costs low, the lowest possible. You start with project-based fulfillments. So initially, what you do, you start with freelancers, and you try during the process. You start to filter those freelancers to see if there's freelancers that meet your view of life and things what you do, that are aligned in how they deal with your clients if they get in touch with them, how they respond with you, how they are faithful in deadlines, or how to communicate. Like there might be like people that you like. For example, I might not always be the best person with deadlines, but it's a lot of times because there's things that come in between. That's life. And that's all sometimes because deadlines aren't really right, because there's a lot of sometimes creativity involved. You can only have that fixed deadlines if there's a fixed time spent on a task. If you say, if you do invoicing, you know the number of clients you have, you know the number of time that costs. So you know each week I need to spend a week, like an hour on that, just because you can say you can set a deadline and you say, okay, I just need an hour. If it's something creative in the initial design process of inspiration, wireframing, going back and forth, doing that. So you need to take a pause. You need to work on another project to open up your headspace to do things. Then that's hard. So during the filtering process, you find, is that someone I can become a partner with long term? Because you get to on a staircase of that you're going up, of people that are, let's say, in a place where they are either initially a like a freelancer, and then secondly, they can become the fulfillment partner, and then a fixed and full-time employee. That what that goes up is reliability and consistency. Those are the two main things that apply. Consistency in time spent with your company, consistency in mainly working with you or like being available, consistency in pay, because you have them as a more consistent spend or investment, depending how you see it. And the main thing is, as you get business starts to scale, you need to provide consistent quality for clients. Consistent quality only does come with consistent processes, consistent documentation, might be even minimal, doesn't need to be large. You need to have different guidelines if you work with different freelancers or different partners. So you don't need to spend every time explaining how you work and what are your base levels in like quality. Doesn't need to be about design, but like design principles, about spacing, about consistency in space, about like maybe kind of the accessibility requirements and how you use colors, how you do things, the systems that you use, plugins that you use within projects. So starting as a business owner and you want to scale up with people, if it's only you and you only want to keep you, only outsource, like get a VA or get someone that does things that you don't like to do. And there's more admin things, and maybe get in touch with clients, write your heartbeat, which I think was an amazing thing when I first saw that, is that I've seen rarely companies do that, or like at least the companies that I work with. And that might also like make the companies I work with typical in a way that those companies might not have too much stuff. But what I see is that most of those like people, they don't need much. Like if you want to stay alone, you don't need much other people rather than a VA to take care of those things that just cost you time and you don't want to do. Because client communication doesn't make you money. And usually building out a project and launching a project makes you more money than hiring a VA to do the same thing and saving up that time. So it's about priorities in terms of like return and profitability. So that's one of the first steps. Like after deciding what you want to do you want to be just you and maybe someone else to do things you don't want to do necessarily? Do you want to have people involved that are able to scale up your company and take over large part of your front, like your revenue generating operations? And then if you want to like get out of the picture a bit while having full-time staff that can make you run your business that way. So that's how I would start and build that up. There might be jumps and you might have a mix of things. If you, let's say you want to add other services, you start again with that process until you have a foreseeable revenue from that service before you can say, okay, I've got to, like, let's say every month consistently over the last year, like $6,000 monthly in SEO revenue, and you can get someone on full time for it too. You do that, you get that one there. But you need to have that margin and space to do that because you need things to be profitable. You need to take yourself a cut because you don't work for them. They work for you. So you need to make more than them on that service, or at least be able to allow that to build your company.
That's actually one of the reasons I like different people have different ways of thinking about it. You know, for me, I think the fulfillment partner is interesting. So I think I got that term from Eric, our mutual friend. But I like to think about a fulfillment partner as basically an isolated agency could be the word to use, but basically another sort of isolated group that you can partner with to fulfill on a service that you maybe aren't, very well versed in yourself. So for me to hire a freelancer to do say, I'm just going to use an example. Let's say that you have multiple options, like for email marketing. Let's say you want to add an email marketing service. Well, you could hire a freelancer and work with them more closely. You're typically going to pay a freelancer with an hourly rate. You're going to work closely to define those processes. You're going to figure out how much it takes, adjust your prices accordingly, and work through that process. Where with something like a fulfillment partner, you might do some research, have some calls, and like decide that there is another agency that you could work with that already does email marketing, and then they can give you a defined price.
No.
And they're also the experts. So if they say, okay, well, it's going to be $150 per email, then you know that if you charge, I mean, it's probably not going to be that much, but just for example, then you know that you're profitable if you charge $300 per email. I like to make that 50%, profit margin, right? So, that for if you're scared to jump into scaling, like if you know that you want to add some more, then this is the time when I think that makes sense. Like if you're trying to build a team, then I think you start with the freelancer route. If you don't really want to manage people or build a team, or even like if you're not thinking about a sellable business like in built to sell, because I don't necessarily think you can count your fulfillment partners as people who because I mean they don't technically work for your business. They do, but they don't. And so I don't know how much that actually would factor into the sale value of the company. Probably not much would be my guess, but I could be wrong there. Regardless, it's if you want to be able to do more services for your clients without having to become the expert in those services or even develop those systems and processes, then a fulfillment partner can be a great first step to getting something like that done.
If you look at larger business, like Apple, do they own factories?
Good point. No.
So value isn't necessarily inside full-time employees, but it's about consistency, and it's about building something that's gonna guarantee in an X amount of time an X amount of turnover increase possibilities.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
So for example, let's say, I think while you were explaining this and how you would see the term fulfillment partner, I think there's 2 types. So there might be 4 types in terms of the scaling possibilities. Because there's a fulfillment partner that can be consistent, that let's say you have design issues and you want to you just need consistency in having an outsourcing company where you outsource design work. You need some custom graphics, some illustrations, you need to do some artwork done, some social media posts, or you want to create some design elements from pages to just spice up the design and make it a little bit alive and seem a little bit more professional and time spent on. And in that space, then you can outsource that to there's a few design companies that you can then outsource that to, that are that are consistent. You just have a monthly subscription to their services. You have an X amount of designs simultaneously, an X amount of revisions. That's what you can do. The second type is the white label partners, which I consider myself part of. Is the main difference is that design agency or someone that you outsource on a fixed, a monthly recurring thing, is they don't have necessarily the best for your company in mind. Because their subscription is going to stay the same. So accounting, bookkeeping, those might get into that category, design agencies as well. They might, independent of the number of invoices you send them, it's part of a predefined package, and it doesn't impact things. White label partners, on the other hand, are usually people that are invested in your business, because with you becoming a viable, very important piece of their company, makes the agency's success, the business owner's success, also their success. Because the more, for example, you start to grow and able to take on more projects, the more consistent the income is going to be for that white label partner as well. The more you're able to charge, if it's subscription based or if it's just normal website design, regular with like maybe payment in 2 or 3 installments, then like white label partners are the perfect choice. But you can only have them if you've gone through them as a freelancer, because you need to like get a feel for who they are consistently, if they are going to be up to the task in everything that your company represents and how you want things to work. That way, I think I will discern like the 2 types between of fulfillment partners, because I think white label partners, and so I think you would see it as partner, like freelancers, partners, business owner, and the partners would be white label partners and fulfillment partners.
Yeah,
because I think fulfillment feels like there's just a gap and they just do that.
Right.
White label partners like they get into a gap, but they also expand the gap. They help you grow and increase that gap of needs.
Yeah. Well, actually, I wonder if there's not 3, right? Because really, you could also have a business partner, like a joint venture type partner where you're, there's actually multiple levels of partnership. So you're helping me think through my framework here. I like that. So basically you've got a freelancer, you've got a partner, and then you've got, a full-time employee. And on the partnership, there's actually like multiple different levels, right? There's the white label, the fulfillment partner, and the JV or the business partner. So that's really interesting. I totally agree. Well, look, I really do want to be respectful of your time here. So we're going to begin to wrap up. So here's what I want to do. I want to give you, because I know these days, like I am fortunate enough to have you on as a white label partner, and I'm very grateful for that. I know that your time is very limited because you have multiple white label partners that you work with. But as anyone listening to this conversation, and by the way, as a side point, if you've got nothing but this conversation other than go read The E-Myth, Built to Sell, and Profit First, you have got a goldmine business education from this episode. So go read those books. But as anyone listening can tell, you have a lot to offer from you're very knowledgeable about business. And so I know you said you're interested in maybe even getting into some consulting work. So tell us more about you in that regard. Like how can you, are you interested in working with people on that way? How can they find you? And just any final remarks that you have.
Because as being a white label partner and just working alone, I just said, like, as we discussed, time is limited. And I like to help people that are looking to scale up. So, or even just improve their business, even if they have it as a side hustle or if they have it as the main thing and they work alone, and they don't necessarily need a white label partner. And I think one of the things might be that what it can help is, and I've done the same with Steve as well. We've gone through some parts of his business as well, besides the white label things, but just analyze things that we might be able to improve to just make the business better. And just calls, it's almost like consultation calls will be similar to like this podcast episode that we just recorded. And just helping to see what are your needs and what are your issues and how can we make those go away or prepare you for doing that. And I think besides working with white label like with agencies, what I like, and that's one of the things, there's always like spots that open up or not, because it's a process of finding a connection with an agency that you feel, okay, here's a connection. And depending on the phases of a company, they might scale up and go more with full-time employees rather than like freelancers or white label partners. And that's the different stages of where a company might be in. And so in that sense, I'm always able to have a chat, and discuss what your needs are. If you do need, for example, a white label partner, is that the current phase? Do you need a freelancer? Is that your phase? Or if you just need someone that is going to help you like diagnose your company and see how we can make it into a better and better functioning company. And I think that's how I would be able to help you best with that in mind.
Yeah.
So I'm currently in the process of redoing my website. So my website is going to be on brightsoul.nl. And if you want to know how you write that, you can see how it is .nl from the Netherlands.
Nice. Very good. Yeah. So you're going to be redoing that. So is that the best place for people to just get in touch with you?
So if there's people that are like in the groups that already have like spoken to me, that's what they can do. They can email me as well at christian@brightsoul.nl.
Cool.
Which is my personal email that they can use. And if you already are in touch with me, like, are on platform, like if you're on Facebook groups with me, you might just send me a message there, or in Josh's pro group, you can always send me a message there if you need to have a chat and see how I can help you grow your business further.
Awesome, man. I really appreciate it. Your time has been awesome today. And that is one thing I can say is, if I can dote on Christian a little bit here, is that he really does care, about your business. Right. And I guess he gets that from his dad. When you were telling the story about being in the small business, you're talking about your dad, like actually consulting with people and like trying to get to the root of it and figure out what the problem is to make sure that the customer gets the right solution. Working with Christian is very much like that. I joke about it. I mean, I don't know if I've ever told you this to your face, so I'm telling you now, because every now and then we'll hop on a quote unquote quick Zoom call, and they usually are like 2.5 hours long. And I'm not saying that's going to happen for you. I'm not suggesting that you're going to hop on a 15-minute call with Christian and it should last hours. But the reason why that happens is because he doesn't just take what you say and then give you the answer that you want to hear. He will actually ask you clarifying questions and like get to the bottom line of what you're trying to accomplish. And because he understands that, it makes the result and the outcome so much better. So, Christian, I just deeply appreciate you. I thank you for your time here. Hang out with me for a minute after I turn off the recording, if you will. And for everyone else, thank you for joining us and for hanging out for a few minutes. And we appreciate your time. And Christian, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me and allowing the two of us just to talk about things that are important to our businesses. And if someone made it to this point, I think you have got a lot of knowledge now to grow your business and go ahead.
100%. All right. Thank you, guys.